Erik Erikson was a German-American developmental psychologist and psychoanalyst known for his theory on psychological development of human beginnings. He is probably most famous for coining the phrases of identity crisis, which we will talk about later. Those are the psychosocial development, and it includes 8 stages, which is trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair. Erikson was born in Frankfurt, Germany in 1902 to Carla Abrahamson. He never knew his biological father and never forgave his mother for that, but she married Theodore Hamburger when Erikson was 3, and he went by Erik Hamburger until 1939 when he changed his surname to Erikson. As a young child, Erikson attended a Jewish temple school and stood out among his peers. He was teased relentlessly for being tall with blue eyes and blonde hair. He looked rather Nordic rather than Jewish. He was rejected at his grammar school for his Jewish background, and he claims that these experiences helped shape his theory on identity and how identity is formed. As a young adult, he married Joan Serson in 1930. They had a young son named Kai, who is now a noted American sociologist, and they fled Vienna in 1933 as Hitler rose to power. They fled to Boston and he began working at Harvard Medical School and became the first man to practice child psychoanalysis. He then moved to Yale's Institute for Human Relations and Yale School of Medicine from 1936 to 1939. During this time, he would conduct a year-long study on the Sioux children at the South Dakota Indian Reservation. He then relocated in California in 1939, where he worked at the Institute of Child Welfare and the University of California, Berkeley from 1939 to 1951. And he would also continue his study on Native American children on the Yorko tribe. He left Berkeley in 1951 after refusing to sign a loyalty oath to the U.S., claiming that he was not a communist, and Berkeley forced him to resign. He returned to Massachusetts in 1951 and began working at the Austin Riggs Center for Emotionally Challenged Youth. He then would move back to Harvard and continue working as a professor in human development. During this time, he conducted many behavior researches and published many books and articles. 3 of those books include Insight and Responsibility in 1964, Identity, Youth, and Crisis in 1968, and Gandhi's Truth in 1969. He remained at Harvard University until he retired in 1970. In 1973, he was elected for the Jefferson Lecture by the National Endowment for the Humanities. At the time, this is one of the highest honors of achievement, and his lecture was titled Dimensions of a New Identity. This is where he went further into his theory and really broke it down. Erikson passed away on May 12, 1994, in Harwich, Massachusetts. His education is actually very interesting. Erikson never earned a formal degree in medicine or psychology. He actually began his continuing of education as an art major, but would meet Anne Freud and begin studying child development at the Vienna Psychoanalytic Institute through the Montessori method, focusing on psychosexual and developmental stages. He did earn a diploma from the Vienna Psychoanalytic Institute, but never a formal degree. All of his knowledge was based on experiences and studies. So, who inspired Erikson? First, we have Anne Freud, who encouraged him to study psychoanalysis, and he also would become a patient of hers. And he is quoted in one of the articles that I linked saying that he paid her $7 a week and they met every day. And she really helped clear his mind and helped him open his mind and help discover all of the theories. And she was a very big help to him. He met Sigmund Freud at a party, and they spoke about his theory. And then Erikson added his own ideas and beliefs to the Freudian theory. Freud's psychosexual theory of development ends in early adulthood, where Erikson's extends throughout your life. Erikson also felt that the ego was not just an avenue for the id, but it's important in its own way. And then also Margaret Mead. Erikson and Mead agreed on their theories and both believed in the psychological motorium. Which psychological motorium is believing adolescents need a period of time without rewards in order to develop skill and creativity. There are 8 stages of Erikson's psychosocial theory. The first stage is stage 1, which is trust versus mistrust. This stage begins in infancy and ends at about 1.5 years old. This is really caregiver based, and it's where your infant is learning to develop trust in their caregivers and in the world around them. And when this is done correctly, this obviously gives these newborns and these children quality of hope, but it also gives them a quality of trust. And if they don't have that trust, then they grow up with a lot of fear. Your next stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt. So in early childhood, from 18 months to about 3 years, these children are gaining a sense of independence and control of their own bodies and their own choices. And when this is done successfully, development of will and determination occur. But if it's not, children will begin to doubt their choices. The next stage is stage 3, which is initiative versus guilt. And this is preschool years from 3 to 6, which we see now as early childhood. But for them, I guess it's preschool years, which is 3 to 6. This is when they begin to explore their environment and the world around them, and they begin to start to make their own more independent choices. When this is done successfully, they really start to develop their sense of purpose in the world, and they begin developing a sense of independence. And when children are not allowed to make choices and fail, they begin to feel a sense of guilt, and that's when you know that this stage was not done successfully. Your school ages from 6 to 12. This is when they develop a sense of personal pride and accomplishment. And when this is done successfully, they also develop a sense of competence and work ethic that will extend throughout their lives. Your teenage years or adolescent years are always the hardest, they say. This is when you start to create a healthy identity and a sense of fidelity. This is when you begin to really find out who you are. And when this stage is done unsuccessfully, or there are other factors like strict parents, children begin to feel a sense of confusion about their role in the world, and it's like they're not given the chance to explore what helps them develop their identities. So it's really important to allow them to explore the world around them and make their own choices and fail and get back up. and help them develop their own identity. Stage 6 is intimacy versus isolation. In early adulthood, it's very important to start creating a healthy relationship with others, and that sets the base for your ability to form committed relationships in all aspects of your life. And if you're not creating that intimacy, it ultimately ends in you being isolated. In middle adulthood, this is when we as humans start wondering how we're contributing to society and leaving our mark on the world. And according to Erikson, this means that you will, you'll have your own career bet, and you'll be ready for your career, and you'll start your career, and then you'll start wondering about raising a family. That's in stage 7, which is generativity versus stagnation. And the generativity would be, having your career and raising your family, where stagnation would be just feeling stuck in your young adulthood and not moving on to your middle adulthood. In stage 8, this is integrity versus despair. This is late adulthood, and it's when you begin reflecting back on your life, and many people will feel a sense of satisfaction if they've successfully done all 7 of the other stages. And if the other 7 were not all done successfully, there may be a lot of regret and a lot of guilt when you look back on your life. I think the most important thing about Erikson's stages is that he emphasizes the need for social experiences across the whole lifespan instead of focusing on just childhood events. It's interesting to me when you'll see this next slide, it's a 9th stage. Erikson's wife proposed the idea of a 9th stage based on the experiences that they had in their late life. She explained that the body breaks down with age and autonomy may no longer be possible. She explained that the challenge in when you are very old is being connected to yourself and to others as you know that death is approaching. Now, whether Erikson agreed with this or not, I believe that his wife was probably very informed about his theory, and she could be correct. This is a quote by Erikson. It says, "Healthy children will not fear life if their elders have integrity not to fear death." And I think that goes along with that last slide, a 9th stage. Now, the 9th stage, again, was not part of Erikson's theory, but it does make sense, and his wife, if anybody, probably knows a lot about his theory. And the next page, you'll see my bibliography.